Welcome back, psychologists. I'm your professor, Ryan Keith. This week, we're talking about social cognition. Not that that title is really all that helpful without being a psychologist in the first place, but I think if we're able to break down that terminology, we can make a little bit of sense out of what social cognition means. The first term, social, makes a lot of sense to you guys. Up to this point, it ties into everything else we're doing. It has to do with how we interact and think about each other. And that term think about is really key here. Cognition has to do with our thinking, our ability to process information. If you took general psychology, you're familiar with cognition relating to how your memory works, how you think about stuff, how you solve problems, what intelligence is, and creativity, all of that sort of stuff. So social cognition, you might think, has to do with how we think about other people. And in that sense, you'd be correct. Except, like a lot of the stuff this semester, social cognition really has two meanings, and it's all about how these two things interact with each other. On the one hand, social cognition is about how we think about other people. But on the other hand, like a lot of the stuff we talk about, it's really about how other people affect the way that we think. How we think about them, how we think about ourselves. Remember, I talked before about how we are unremovable from our social situations. They have these effects that are so powerful and so pervasive that they're invisible to us. We don't realize we're being pushed and pulled by the people around us. And these effects can change the way that we see physical objects, that we see other people, and even how we see ourselves. A lot of the basic information from your textbook, from one of my videos, is on exactly how we process this information. I'm going to talk to you guys about something that I find really interesting and that a lot of students find a discussion like this is helpful on, called schemas and construals. You might be familiar with the term schema or schemata or schemas from psychology or philosophy class, and we're going to talk some about how that stuff works. Basically, it all has to do with how we organize information in our heads and how we make use of that information to understand the world around us. Much like how our memories work, though, the way these systems work make us really prone to misunderstanding things. We're also going to talk a lot about how we can't trust our cognition. In general psychology, your instructor may have talked to you some about biases. And we're going to talk about biases and heuristics, these mental shortcomings and shortcuts that make it so that we don't see the world or ourselves the way that it really is. Remember, at the beginning of the semester, I promised to talk to you about how nobody out there, not even yourself, is who you think they are. And that's really what we're talking about this week here. Of course, I'm going to talk about this, but your book talks about it. The podcast that I give you ties it into bigger social issues and about how we suffer from these biases that we don't even know are there and how scientists identify them. And one of my favorite things I have assigned you guys to read, it's a webcomic, or it's an entry from the webcomic The Oatmeal, in which he talks about something called belief persistence and specifically the backfire effect, something that I think is really good to keep in mind, especially during an election year. And then, in what I'm calling the single slide series, I talked to you guys about one of my favorite slides in all of my social psychology slides that I use for my in-person classes, and talked to you about the overconfidence bias. Why it is we feel like we're going to do a really great job at stuff when often all of the evidence points at that absolutely not being the case. So stick around as we jump into some kind of heavy social cognition stuff. This week, next week, and the week after are going to be some kind of like heady things, but they really create the foundation for everything else this semester. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and talk with me. I'm going to have office hours, of course, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but you can also feel free to send me an email or a message in Canvas about any question you have. So study hard, learn about how we learn, think about how we think, and I'll look forward to talking to you about how we're wrong about everything online.